Absolutely. You have no doubt in the discourse. But to take a note from both of y'all, Brother War likes to say, instead of saying, where are you or what are you, when are you? And the when is right now. Right now is what we got to deal with. And as Brother Syke likes to talk about, and quote, you can't take the people from A to Z. You got to take them from A to B to C through, and this gets into the process. And part of the process is realization of where you are, when you are, and what's effective and what's not. For us to at this point identify, because I agree, absolutely, 100%. Before they came up with the word African, we weren't African. We were people. Weren't even people. We were whatever we were. We were chilling. We were gods. But we're dealing in a society right now where the word human is absolutely meaningless because Europeans, if we sit up, we're not being oppressed because we are human beings. White folks, aside from the fringes and you know the clan folk and all of that who want to get into apes and call names and be slanderous. I'm not talking about those morons. I'm talking about the mainstream will sit up and say, yeah, you're human. We're human. We're all just human. It's just that you're less of the human. You're not exactly what we do or what we are as human. We're better human. We're more human. You're lesser of that. So that concept and an idea who right now in this point in time is utterly meaningless. We are oppressed for from one reason, not because we're human. You know, if there were aliens that came down and oppressed all human beings, then to sit up at some point and say, I'm a human being, I'm a human, that would be meaningful because it's bucking the system of human oppression. It wouldn't be racism, white supremacy, it would be alien supremacy. And all humans are pressed down. So to push back, you have to assert, I am human and roll with that. But we're in a day and age where we're oppressed based on the fact of this categorization, this social construct called race, and that's what we have to deal with. And before, in the process, before we can get to the point where we say, yes, we're all human beings. Because right now, if we say, well, we're just all human beings, that means we just have to go along with what our human brothers do to us. You know, they may be beating us and all of that shit, but we're all just human beings. We bleed red blood and blah, blah, and all that nonsense. So that idea is co opted and is meaningless in this society to say, to jump from A, you know, you're a nigga, to jump down to a human being. Okay, I'm a human. And you've left out all the steps in between. And we know that it's the process getting to the realization of what human really is. All of those steps, A through X or X through what comes before Z, Y. A through Y is what it is that develops that real understanding and that in tuneness with what it is Z actually is. We can't even understand Z before we go through the struggle to get from L to M to N. We have to have those experiences in order to understand the end state. So yeah, we're human beings, but that's like I said, that's meaningless and carries no power in a system that says
I knew you had a little sense, boy. I almost doubted you sitting there recording your call from
really,
a phone. I saw,
really,
I saw.
really,
But yeah, no, I'm just having a little fun. I like that though. That makes sense. It make all
but
the sense in the world.
the reason that the word African is the most revolutionary thing that you can say. I don't even want to be called a revolutionary anymore because that word's been co-opted. It is absolutely meaningless in this society because every jackass with a rifle who's shooting the cats that's on his own team accidentally in the middle of the street and coming up with some nonsense excuse. There was a training in Newbie area. Bull, whatever. We know what's going on. You can tell that to them, but you and I know. Uh, um, Everybody uses the word, so it's absolutely meaningless. So the most powerful thing that we can call ourselves in a system that says that Africans are on the bottom and are absolutely worthless. The most powerful thing we can do is to reassert that reality and say, no, fuck you, I'm an African, and roll with it. You know, the whole dead prez type of attitude and roll with that as a swag. And that's the first step in the process to me because that was the first step in the process of breaking us down and bringing us to this point was to take away that humanity. So when we assert that humanity, read From the Browder File by Anthony T. Browder and start to go into it. You know, I know a lot of people want to jump into things like the other ends of it, economics and especially spirituality. Folks like to jump from A to way down the line in terms of African spirituality. But if we do that, what ends up happening a lot of times is you get folks that will take in naturally this European mindset that we've been forced to take on. We'll take that into our dealings with African spiritual concepts. For instance, if we can sit up here, me, you, and War can talk about the various gods of Kemet, you know, Asar, Set, Heru, Shu, all of these different cats. We can talk about that and call them gods left and right because we understand, we've come to a realization that what we're saying is not actually God. That's just a terminology at this point is for ease of discussion between us. But in reality, that's the European interpretation. Those were not, the African people have never been polytheistic. We know there's one God, but we also recognize the multifacetedness of it. We also recognize that the sun that's giving us life and light and all of these things is a part of God. That's God's finger. We also recognize that this river over here that's giving us, helping to provide irrigation for the farms and travel up and down the Nile back and forth to move, basically acting as a highway. That's that's another finger of God. So all of these different pieces are just personalities, aspects. It's us recognizing the the various uh, 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 expressions of what God is. But we have to go through that process of breaking down the language, breaking down the mindset, breaking down the perspective. Otherwise, we go from yeah, Greek gods, all these different gods, is the same as the Netheru in Kemet. It's the same thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. I've had arguments with cats that were in the military say, yeah, Egypt, they had a bunch of gods, but I told them no. We had one god and I've been to Egypt and da da da. Give a damn where you've been to. You know, I've been in Florida. I'm no more an expert on the Seminole religious systems or spiritual systems in Florida than anybody else. Just because you live someplace don't mean that you know anything about the place that you live. So trying to jump from A on down the line, and again, using that example, taking that idea of a whole bunch of different gods and applying that European concept of what that means to our African perspective is just going to cause more confusion and laziness. I see that a lot. As one of the reasons I steer clear of a lot of spiritual systems in this country because it ends up being the same as the fucking church. You know, oh, what are we gonna do about the brother that got shot in the back? Let's pray and talk to the Orishas and that's it. No, 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 that's not what we do. We go and we have a conversation and we go out, we go to war. You know, there are many nations, Zulu and just all across the board, the cats will sit up and go into meditations and spiritual realms and whatnot. And the night before and then the next day go out to war because that's what that shit is supposed to play for us. It's a backing, it's a motivator, it's a fine tuning for us to go into something. Whereas here, again, taking that European mindset, religion and spiritual systems are the end all and be all. Go pray to your God and let him take care of your business. That's not what we do. So we have to first begin to re-brainwash, to unbrainwash. Matter of fact, they brainwash, we need to cleanse. You start wiping that out. And that's why I like to go to the Browder file because it's collection of we all read it, real short essays, sit on the toilet and read you an essay while you in there and go on about your business. Next time you go to the potty, go in there and bust it open, read you another essay and go about your business to begin giving us an idea of a different perspective, giving us baby steps as we start out at A to start moving down that process. We can't jump to civil rights or any of these other things until we begin to change where we're looking at the issue from. Because right now we're looking at it from their viewpoint. We're looking at slavery as a curious institution, as they like to call it, as an economic thing that and how it affected Europeans and what they did about. We don't talk about those things from our perspective, and that's the first thing that has to happen is we have to start realizing that hey, we have a perspective in this too. You know, we were in slavery. We have an opinion. So for me, that's the first step in the process is beginning to look back at one's history so that we can begin to answer those who, what, where, when types of questions. So yes, Q man.
And let me say this real quick, just to also deal with the perspectives that go into some of the weaponization. Um, what I would say the white male attempts to do and does do is to draw in a quote unquote advancement or evolution of the European way of being evolving to a greater or higher degree than what the African is. When you think of the African, they try to make it seem like it was I would say uncivilized, so to speak, or backwoods, or again make it appear as though there's no actual civilization advancement. That's the perception that they create, and in doing so, it basically, when you want to think of human or the current human state, this goes back to some of the Darwinism. You want to create the current human state, then the as something gets lighter from that standpoint, it gets more evolved and more civilized. So even when we subconsciously refer back to ourselves as being African, then a lot of us, because of the weaponization of perception, think, going into the bush, think not being able to generate or produce society as it applies to advancement or being in control of your environment. So the psychological warfare is played into that, and you naturally want to refer back to or think that African means that you're going backwards, so when we talk Sankofa, which means to go back and get from, they have weaponized the process and make it appear as though what we're doing is devolving. So we got to be mindful of that the psychological damage that does is because of what they associated with. And the same thing that they do with mass religion. When you think of a God, the whole point is to make you think of somebody that is European. And if you think of an African God, the whole point is to make you think of something that is quote unquote backwards. But in saying that, I also want to throw out there that, with that being said, in the sex community, when you talk about Greek, that means anal sex. But yet the African is backwards. So I got to throw that attack out there. Now I'm done. Hey, I got to make sure people get it. So you want to call African backwards, but Greek is anal.
That's your boy right there, ain't it?
Hey, baby, you want to get a little freaky, get some Greek tonight? What the hell? Greek food? No, not Greek food, man. No.
And I think one of the most important things that has been said in this conversation, though, is, and Tony Browder needs to thank us for this, is that is a good place to start, especially for reconstituting our thinking with the Browder file, because it's small. As you just, I don't feel like getting up getting it, but as you just said, it's small. It's where I get it here. But it's small, it's easy to read. And
while you sipping your hot instant tea.
Yeah. So by Anthony T. Browder, great book to read, great book to start with that. And I would say then, after reading that little small book, look how little it is. So it ain't anything to read. It's not hard to read at all. I would say then you need to go to the Survival Strategies for Africans in America, which is his part 2 in that series. Those 2 books by themselves will give you the information needed to understand the whole conversation of what we're talking about, the whole point of the conversation of what we're talking about when we're talking about identifying the self as African or having that African perspective, learning how to see the world from our own point of view. And I think that that's very important for any true revolutionary, because it starts to wake up in our minds how deep that dehumanizing has occurred for us in our thinking. I mean, I always use this example. I always use it. And I didn't understand how deep it was, how powerful it was, until I read this book years ago. But this book made me look back on these experiences. When I was a little boy, my grandmother used to have this big old huge Bible sitting on her couch. I mean, on her coffee table. And in black homes in the ghetto, a lot of black people had these big, humongous Bibles, and they had them open on the coffee table, and they had all these pictures in them. And as a little boy, I used to love to look at the pictures of Samson tearing apart a lion, Moses splitting the sea. I used to love to look at all these pictures. And then, it comes to a point where you get old enough where you start looking around and you start noticing that everybody in my neighborhood, everybody that ever came in this house is black. And these people in this book isn't. So I asked my grandmother, I said, my dear, why aren't we in the Bible? Because you believe at this time in your life that this is the beginning of people. This Bible is the oldest transcript of human beings on the planet, and that it talks about everything that has ever happened on Earth. That's what you believe at that time. So I'm like, I should be able to see some black people in here. And my grandmother told me, she said, "Oh, baby, we didn't exist at that time." And I accepted that, and I thought this was the truth. Now, my grandmother was not trying to lie to me. She had no other choice because she didn't have this. She had no other choice but to tell me what she told me because that's what she understood. The dehumanizing process had already taken place way before she was even born and was passed down to her, and she passed it down to her children and passed it down to us. And this is what has happened. And there could be no true liberation until that is taken off of our minds and taken off our eyes. And that's why the brother keep on referring back to the broadified, because while it might not be the deepest or the most in-depth book, but it is a good A to start with. It is a great step A to start with in the reversal of those processes and getting an understanding of what actually took place when we're talking about this dehumanizing. It gives you an understanding of what took place with us.
Yeah, and it gets you to recognize and destroys the myth of thinking that going back to our roots is basically reverting back to a slave or a uncivilized state. It goes into recognizing the advancements of and the richness of our African culture, so that you can actually realize that it is actually something to be proud of, and then not associate with being connected to our Africanness with being backwards as a people. Because keep in mind, majority of the things were stolen in terms of knowledge, were stolen from the African. And so part of conquering is to take credit for something, even though you didn't actually do it. So that's what it does as well. Is it gives the credit right back to who we are. And then from that standpoint, we can be proud, walk with our head up, recognize that, hey, we have been dehumanized, and it has basically been an attack and a weapon used against us. And so therefore, in order to pull ourselves to a position of empowerment, we snatch it back. We snatch back our historical significance. We snatch back the fact that we created this. They discovered us. And because they discovered us, don't make them great. We were already here. We already was in existence. We already done something. So when you discover something, that's just you recognizing the fact that, hey, that's what this means. But a discovery don't mean that you are the originator of it. And so that's that other part of the warfare, weaponized aspect too, is to take credit for something and refer to it as your discovery.
Word.
Word. And one of the things I like to always point out is, toward the end, I get a little long-winded, so I'm gonna try not to. But one of the things I always like to point out is this: when dealing with this subject matter, we tend to think, again, going back to this dehumanizing and this psychological warfare, and one of the things that we got to free ourselves from, we tend to believe, because of where we are in human development and in the development of civilization, that if white people wouldn't have came along, that there would not be such high development. There would not be a smartphone and the internet and things like that. We tend to believe this. But in that type of situation, it's like if you sit back and I read in the Forbes magazine probably about a good 10 years ago, and they projected that if Jay-Z kept doing everything that he was doing, making money at the rate that he was making money, that by now he would be a billionaire. And he's a billionaire now. They didn't have any he was not a billionaire 10 years ago, but they had evidence based on how he was operating, how he was moving, how he was investing, and at the rate he was making his finances, they was able to do the math to say in 10 years he'll be a billionaire. Or the same thing they can predict when it comes to dealing with the growth of human population in such and such years, there'll be 8 billion people on the planet. If people continue to grow at the rate that they're growing and no major catastrophe occurs. But the point I'm getting at is this. If you look at the development of African technology and knowledge at our height before our civilization was interrupted, and then you do that same type of trajectory, then I'm pretty sure, I'm confident that technology and knowledge will be further than it is now, because somebody had to interrupt the development of that civilization. Then they had to learn how to use it before they could start building on top of it. So there was an interruption and a slowdown process. Twice African people took civilization to Europeans. Twice in the history of mankind, this took place. First time with their greatest civilizations on record, Greece, and Rome. That knowledge, that philosophy, that mathematics, all of that came out of Africa. They went down into Africa, went into Kemet, and got that knowledge from there, and built their house of knowledge on that. Then they failed. You always got to ask yourself when you're studying history, how could they have Greece and Rome universally accepted as the homes of philosophy and mathematics and all that? And we know that's not true. But how could they have that and then go into the Dark Ages? How could that be possible? And the only way that that happened because a certain select people had knowledge and they didn't give it to the mass of the people. So when those people was killed, died, or was compromised, and that knowledge was completely lost, those people, they had nothing. So that knowledge was 100% completely lost. And then the Moors from North Africa went back into Europe along the Dark Ages and took them out of the darkness once again, took civilization back up to Europe. Europeans know of Plato, Socrates, and all that because Moors took that up there and had it, and they were translated into Arabic and took it up there and gave it to them. The mathematical system we use today, 0 through 9, is truly is the Hindu system. They call it the Arabic system, but truly is the Hindu system. Even the word algebra comes from Al-Jabbar, who took that knowledge out of Kemet and then brought that knowledge back into Europe. So Europe had been brought out of out of their darkness, out of their lostness twice from African people. Twice this took place. So I say that and I bring that point up because it shows you that we was at a high level of knowledge and a high level of understanding before our development was arrested. And you got to really think about what that means, arrested development, what that means. So we did not need anything or any outsiders to bring us knowledge or even help humanity rise to the point where we're at now. We never needed that. So I think that's very, very important to understand. And then when you, like Brother War explained earlier, when you decide to conquer people, you can't conquer a warrior. You can't conquer a highly intelligent man. The people that you can't get rid of their intelligence, you kill them. You got to take out and kill all the warriors, all those who stand for this symbol of great divine black humanity. You got to take them out. All the ones who had knowledge that you can't compromise, you have to take them out of the game. Then you have to strip that from the rest of the people that's left. You have to take away their religion, their moral ways, their folk ways, their culture, their language. You have to take it all from them. In the Bible, and I think it's in the book of Daniel, they give us a story. And like I always like to say, when we read these stories from scripture, we're not reading these stories to sit around and wax poetic about what some guy did 4,000 years ago. That's not why you're reading it. You're reading it because in these stories are formula for development. It gives you an ideal of what's going on now based on what happened then. And sometimes these stories never even happened historically. They're not meant to be taken as historical fact, but as metaphorical truth for you to wrap your mind around certain concepts and ideas. But back to the book of Daniel, we're shown what an oppressor does when they take over a people. When Babylon conquered the Israelite people, they took their people. If you look at in the book of Daniel, they took them, they changed their names. They gave them the Babylonian language. They gave them the Babylonian religion. They took their best. They took their best. They most beautiful and most wise men changed their name, changed their language, changed their religion, and then they set them down and made them eat the Babylonian food. All of this is metaphorical. They made them eat the Babylonian food because this is how you compromise a people. This is that whole process of dehumanizing. I put my name on you. I put my language in you. I put my culture in you, and I make you call the name of my gods. That's the only way that you can really conquer people, because if you allow them to have that tie, that culture, that tie that binds, then you can never truly conquer any group of people that can see that can still recognize humanity in their own divine culture.
Right.
And with that, if you brothers ain't got nothing else to say,
I do got one thing to say. I want to end it on this. Be African, don't go Greek.
Tony Browder, I think you owe us a shout out because we need some affiliate links or something the way we promote this Spotify. But this was the Panther 48. The discussion was dehumanizing and its effects on African psychology and the movement. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. We'll continue to bring you good content. Peace.